The snowstorm had been raging for hours, blanketing the small town of Maplewood in a thick layer of white. The wind howled through the trees, shaking branches heavy with snow, while icy gusts whipped through the deserted streets. Most residents had retreated indoors long before nightfall, seeking refuge from the biting cold and relentless weather. But Sarah wasn't like most people. She couldn't sit idly by when she knew someone might need help. Sarah lived alone in a modest house, at the edge of town. It was cozy with warm yellow walls and mismatched furniture that gave it a lived-in charm. Despite her quiet life, she had always been the kind of person who noticed others, whether it was holding the door open for a stranger or offering a listening ear to a friend in trouble. That evening, as she stood by her living room window watching the storm intensify, her gaze shifted across the street to Mrs. Thompson's house. Mrs. Thompson was an elderly woman who rarely left her home anymore. Her husband had passed away years ago, and her children lived far away, leaving her isolated except for occasional visits from neighbors. Sarah often checked in on her, especially during harsh winters like this one. Earlier that day, she'd seen Mrs. Thompson shuffle to her mailbox but retreat quickly, clutching her coat tightly against the freezing air. Something about the way the older woman moved, or didn't move, had worried Sarah. As darkness fell, Sarah's concern grew. She glanced outside again and noticed something odd. Mrs. Thompson's porch light was flickering weakly, casting uneven shadows on the snow-covered ground. Then, after a few moments, the light went out entirely. A chill ran down Sarah's spine, not from the cold, but from the sinking feeling that something wasn't right. She hesitated for a moment, staring at her reflection in the frosted glass of the window. The storm outside was brutal, and venturing out would be dangerous. But the thought of Mrs. Thompson sitting alone in the dark, possibly without heat or food, gnawed at her conscience. "What if she needs me?" Sarah whispered to herself. With a deep breath, she grabbed her heavy coat, scarf, gloves, and boots, then stuffed a flashlight, some candles, and a grocery bag filled with essentials into a backpack. Stepping outside felt like walking into a freezer. The wind stung her cheeks, and every step forward required effort as the snow reached almost to her knees. Each gust threatened to knock her off balance, but she pressed on, determined to reach Mrs. Thompson's house. Her mind raced with worst-case scenarios. What if Mrs. Thompson had fallen? What if the power outage had left her stranded without a way to call for help? By the time Sarah reached the porch, her fingers were numb, and her breath came in short, frosty puffs. She knocked loudly on the front door, calling out, "Mrs. Thompson, are you there?" There was no answer. Frowning, she tried the doorknob and found it unlocked. Pushing the door open just enough to peek inside, she called again, "Mrs. Thompson, it's Sarah." The house was eerily silent, save for the faint creak of the floorboards beneath her feet. The dim glow of moonlight filtering through the curtains illuminated patches of the living room, revealing overturned chairs and scattered papers, an unsettling sight. Sarah's heart pounded as she stepped further inside, her boots crunching softly on the wooden floor. "Mrs. Thompson?" she called once more, her voice trembling slightly. Her search led her to the kitchen, where she spotted a half-empty cup of tea abandoned on the counter. The liquid was still lukewarm, which meant Mrs. Thompson hadn't been gone long. Relief washed over Sarah briefly, but it was short-lived. As she turned toward the hallway, she heard a faint sound, a soft whimper coming from the direction of the living room. Following the noise, Sarah discovered Mrs. Thompson curled up near the fireplace, wrapped in a thin blanket. Her face was pale and her lips had a bluish tint. The fire had burned down to embers, leaving the room frigid and unwelcoming. Sarah knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Mrs. Thompson, can you hear me?" The older woman stirred, weakly, her eyes fluttering open. "Sarah?" she murmured, her voice barely audible. I couldn't get the fire going again, and the power—" Her words trailed off as another shiver racked her body. Without wasting a moment, Sarah sprang into action. She helped Mrs. Thompson sit up and wrapped her in additional blankets from the nearby couch. Then, using logs stacked neatly beside the hearth, she coaxed the dying flames back to life. The crackling fire slowly began to chase away the chill, casting flickering shadows on the walls. Next, Sarah rummaged through the pantry, finding cans of soup and crackers. Using a camping stove she kept in her backpack for emergencies, she heated the soup and handed a steaming bowl to Mrs. Thompson. For nearly 2 hours, Sarah stayed by Mrs. Thompson's side, ensuring she ate and drank enough to regain some strength. She listened patiently as the older woman recounted how the storm had knocked out the electricity early that morning, leaving her trapped and unable to call for help. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't come," Mrs. Thompson admitted, tears glistening in her eyes. "You're my guardian angel, Sarah." Sarah smiled softly, brushing off the compliment. "It's just what anyone would do," she said, though deep down she knew not everyone would have braved the storm. Before leaving, she promised to return the next morning to check on Mrs. Thompson and bring more supplies if needed. Exhausted but satisfied, Sarah trudged back home through the swirling snow, unaware that her simple act of kindness had set off a chain of events that would change her life forever. Little did she know, someone, or something, had been watching her closely that night, observing her actions with great interest. High above the storm clouds, hidden among the stars, a pair of glowing eyes narrowed in curiosity. This human, so small yet so brave, had caught their attention, and they intended to find out why. Sarah's journey back home was even harder than her trip to Mrs. Thompson's house. The storm had grown fiercer, and the wind now howled like a wild animal, pushing against her with relentless force. Every step felt heavier than the last, her legs sinking deeper into the snow with each movement. Her flashlight flickered intermittently, its beam struggling to cut through the thick curtain of falling flakes. She pulled her scarf tighter around her face, trying to shield herself from the biting cold, but it was no use. The icy air seeped through every layer of clothing. Despite the harsh conditions, Sarah's thoughts kept returning to Mrs. Thompson. She couldn't shake the image of the frail woman huddled by the dying fire, shivering and alone. It made her chest tighten with both sadness and determination. "I'll go back tomorrow," she muttered under her breath, as if saying it aloud would make the promise real. She shouldn't have to go through this alone. When Sarah finally reached her front door, she collapsed onto the floor inside, exhausted and soaked to the bone. Her cheeks were flushed from the cold, and her fingers tingled painfully as they began to thaw. After peeling off her wet clothes and wrapping herself in a warm blanket, she sat by the heater, sipping hot tea to regain some warmth. The storm outside continued to rage, rattling the windows and filling the house with an eerie symphony of creaks and groans. As the hours passed, Sarah drifted in and out of sleep, her mind replaying the events of the night. The memory of Mrs. Thompson's gratitude lingered in her thoughts, bringing a small smile to her face despite her fatigue. But just as she was about to drift off completely, a strange sensation prickled at the edges of her awareness. At first, she dismissed it as part of the storm, perhaps a branch scraping against the roof or the wind finding its way through cracks in the walls. Yet the feeling persisted, growing stronger with each passing minute. It wasn't until she heard a faint knock on the door that Sarah realized something was truly wrong. The sound was soft but unmistakable, a single deliberate tap against the wood. Sarah froze, her teacup halfway to her lips. Her heart skipped a beat, then began pounding loudly in her ears. Who could possibly be outside at this hour? And why would anyone brave the storm to visit her? Her first instinct was to ignore it. Maybe it was just the wind playing tricks on her tired mind. But when the knock came again, louder this time, she knew it wasn't her imagination. Setting the teacup down carefully, she grabbed the flashlight from the table and crept toward the door, her footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. Each step felt heavier than the last, weighed down by a mix of fear and curiosity. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice trembling slightly. There was no response, only the endless roar of the storm outside. Taking a deep breath to steady herself, Sarah unlocked the door and opened it just a crack, shining the flashlight into the darkness. What she saw made her gasp in shock. Standing on her porch was a figure unlike anything she'd ever encountered before. Tall and slender, It was cloaked in shimmering silver fabric that seemed to ripple like water under the dim light. Its face was obscured by a glowing visor, casting an ethereal glow that illuminated the swirling snowflakes around it. Sarah's grip on the flashlight tightened as she stared, unable to look away. Was this some kind of prank? A hallucination brought on by exhaustion? Or something else entirely? "I mean you no harm," the figure said suddenly, its voice calm yet strangely resonant, as though it carried weight beyond mere words. The tone sent chills down Sarah's spine, not because it sounded threatening, but because it felt so alien, so unfamiliar. "Who are you?" Sarah stammered, taking a cautious step backward. Her pulse raced and her mind scrambled to make sense of what was happening. "What do you want?" The figure tilted its head slightly as if studying her. "I am Kyle," it replied, "and I have come to speak with you." "Speak with me?" Sarah echoed, her confusion mounting. "About what? Why are you here?" Kyle paused for a moment as though considering how best to explain. Then, in a voice that was both gentle and commanding, it said, "Your act of kindness tonight. It was not unnoticed." Sarah blinked, trying to process what Kale had just said. "Kindness? What are you talking about?" "You braved a deadly storm to help another human being," Kale explained. "Such actions are rare among your species. Many choose selfishness, over compassion, especially in times of hardship. Yet you risked your own safety to care for someone in need." Sarah shook her head slowly, still unsure whether she was dreaming or awake. That's just what people do. Anyone would have done the same." Kale's glowing visor seemed to brighten slightly as if amused by her response. "No, Sarah. Not everyone would have acted as you did. Humanity is capable of great cruelty, but also great love. Tonight you chose love." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Sarah felt a lump rise in her throat. She didn't consider herself heroic. She had simply followed her instincts, doing what felt right. But hearing Kale describe her actions in such profound terms left her feeling both humbled and uneasy. "Why does any of this matter to you?" she asked cautiously. "Who, or what, are you really?" Kale hesitated, as if debating how much to reveal. Finally it spoke. "I belong to a race of beings who observe life across the universe. We travel the stars, studying civilizations to determine their worthiness to join the greater cosmos. Your planet, Earth, has long been watched, but rarely has it shown signs of true progress." Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief. Aliens? Observing humanity? It sounded like something out of a science fiction movie. Yet Kale's presence was undeniable, its aura radiating an otherworldly calm that silenced any doubts she might have had. "So, you're saying you've been watching us?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "And my helping Mrs. Thompson somehow caught your attention?" Kale nodded. "Yes. Acts of selflessness, especially in moments of adversity, are markers of potential. They show that humanity is capable of growth, of rising above its flaws. Your actions tonight were significant." Significant. The word echoed in Sarah's mind, leaving her both awestruck and overwhelmed. She had never thought of herself as anything special, just an ordinary person living an ordinary life. But now, standing face to face with an alien visitor, she couldn't deny the enormity of what Kale was telling her. "What happens now?" she asked softly, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "Why tell me all this? What do you want from me?" Kale's posture softened, and for the first time, Sarah detected a hint of warmth in its demeanor. "Nothing is required of you," it said. "You have already done enough. However, I wish to offer you something, a token of gratitude for reminding us of the goodness that exists within your kind." With that, Kale extended a hand, revealing a small crystal pendant resting in its palm. The object glimmered faintly, pulsing with a golden light that seemed to resonate with the rhythm of Sarah's heartbeat. Mesmerized, she reached out tentatively and took it, feeling its smooth surface beneath her fingertips. "This will protect you," Kyle explained. "But more importantly, it will serve as a reminder of the power you hold within yourself. The ability to inspire change, to spread kindness, and to shape the future of your world." Before Sarah could respond, Kyle stepped back, retreating into the storm. Within moments, its glowing form disappeared entirely, swallowed by the swirling snow. Sarah stood frozen on her porch, clutching the pendant tightly in one hand as the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. For several minutes, she simply stared into the darkness, her mind racing with questions she couldn't answer. Who were these beings? What did they truly want from humanity? And why had they chosen her, of all people, to deliver their message? Eventually, the biting cold forced her back inside. As she closed the door behind her, Sarah glanced down at the pendant once more. Its soft glow filled the room with a comforting warmth, chasing away the lingering chill. Whatever the future held, one thing was certain: her life, and perhaps the fate of humanity itself, had changed forever. The next morning, Sarah woke up with a start, her heart pounding as fragments of the previous night flooded her mind. The snowstorm had subsided, leaving behind a pristine blanket of white that stretched endlessly across Maplewood. Sunlight streamed through her bedroom window, casting golden rays over the walls and warming the chilly room. But despite the calm outside, Sarah couldn't shake the surreal encounter she'd had with Cale. It felt like a dream. Too strange, too impossible. But the pendant resting on her bedside table told her otherwise. She picked it up cautiously, examining its delicate design. The crystal seemed almost alive, pulsing faintly with a soft golden light that matched the rhythm of her breathing. Every time she held it, a sense of peace washed over her, as though it carried some kind of energy or purpose beyond her understanding. "This can't be real," she whispered to herself, yet deep down she knew it was. Her thoughts drifted back to Cale's words. "Your act of kindness was not unnoticed." She replayed the moment she'd braved the storm to help Mrs. Thompson, wondering how something so ordinary could have such extraordinary consequences. Was it really possible that her small gesture had caught the attention of beings from another world? And what did they mean when they said humanity was being observed? Determined to make sense of everything, Sarah decided to visit Mrs. Thompson again. If nothing else, talking to someone familiar would ground her in reality. Wrapping herself in her coat and scarf, she stepped outside into the crisp winter air. The streets were eerily quiet, the only sounds coming from the occasional drip of melting snow sliding off rooftops. As she walked, Sarah clutched the pendant tightly in her pocket, drawing comfort from its steady glow. When she arrived at Mrs. Thompson's house, the older woman greeted her with a warm smile. "Sarah, I wasn't expecting you so soon," she said, ushering her inside. The fire was crackling merrily in the hearth, and the scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the air. Clearly, Mrs. Thompson had recovered some of her strength overnight. "Just wanted to check on you," Sarah replied, sitting down by the fireplace. "How are you feeling?" "Much better, thanks to you," Mrs. Thompson said gratefully. "You saved me last night, Sarah. I don't know what I would have done without your help." Sarah shook her head modestly. It was nothing. Anyone would have done the same. But Mrs. Thompson leaned forward earnestly, her eyes twinkling. "No, dear. Not everyone would have gone out in that storm for a stranger. You're special, Sarah. Don't ever forget that." Her words echoed Cale's message, sending a shiver down Sarah's spine. For the first time, she began to see her actions in a different light, not as something trivial, but as part of something much bigger. Still, she hesitated to share her encounter with Cale. How could she explain something so unbelievable without sounding crazy? Instead, she changed the subject, asking Mrs. Thompson if she needed anything else. They spent the next hour chatting about mundane things, the weather, recipes, old memories, and for a while Sarah managed to push thoughts of aliens and cosmic observations to the back of her mind. Later that afternoon, as Sarah returned home, she noticed something unusual. A black SUV was parked near the edge of her driveway, its windows tinted so darkly that she couldn't see inside. Her steps slowed instinctively, her fingers tightening around the pendant in her pocket. Who could it be? Visitors were rare in this quiet neighborhood, especially unannounced ones. Before she could decide whether to approach or retreat, the driver's side door opened, and a man stepped out. He was tall and lean, dressed in a sharp black suit that contrasted sharply with the snowy landscape. His face was clean-shaven, his expression unreadable, and his piercing gray eyes locked onto hers immediately. "Miss Sarah Bennett?" he asked, his voice smooth and professional. "Yes," Sarah replied cautiously, stopping a few feet away. "Can I help you?" The man nodded, pulling out a badge clipped to his belt. "My name is Agent Carter. I'm with the Department of Homeland Security. We received reports of unusual activity in this area last night and wanted to follow up." Sarah's stomach dropped. Had someone seen Cale? Or worse, had they tracked him here somehow? She forced herself to remain calm, her grip on the pendant hidden beneath her coat. "Unusual activity? What do you mean?" Agent Carter studied her carefully, his tone measured. "There were sightings of unidentified lights in the sky during the storm. Some residents reported hearing strange noises as well. Did you notice anything unusual last night?" Sarah hesitated, weighing her options. Telling the truth seemed risky. How could she explain meeting an alien without sounding insane? On the other hand, lying outright might raise suspicions. Finally, she settled on a partial truth. "I didn't see any lights or hear anything strange," she said slowly. "I was helping a neighbor who lost power during the storm, that's all." Agent Carter's gaze lingered on her for a moment longer before he nodded. "I see. Well, if you do notice anything unusual, please let us know. Here's my card." He handed her a business card, which she took reluctantly. "Of course," she murmured, tucking it into her pocket. "I'll keep an eye out. As agent to you." Carter returned to his vehicle and drove away. Sarah exhaled deeply, her nerves still on edge. Something about his visit felt off, as though he already suspected more than he let on. She glanced down at the pendant again, wondering if it had somehow drawn unwanted attention. Whatever the case, she resolved to keep it, and her encounter with Cale, a secret. That evening, Sarah sat alone in her living room, staring at the pendant as it rested on the coffee table. Its golden glow pulsed softly, casting dancing shadows on the walls. She tried to piece together everything that had happened: the storm, Mrs. Thompson, Cale's visit, and now Agent Carter's unexpected appearance. It all felt connected, like pieces of a puzzle waiting to be solved. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden flash of light outside her window. Startled, she rushed to the glass and peered out into the darkness. At first, she saw nothing but the empty street and the snow-covered trees. Then above the horizon, she spotted it, a faint shimmering object hovering silently in the sky. It wasn't a plane or a drone. Its shape was too fluid, too organic, shifting like liquid metal under the moonlight. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Could it be Cale? Or were there others like him watching her now? Her instincts screamed at her to stay put, to avoid drawing attention to herself, but curiosity got the better of her. Grabbing her coat and the pendant, she slipped outside quietly, her boots crunching softly against the snow. As she approached the edge of her yard, the object descended slowly, lowering itself until it hovered just above the ground. Its surface rippled like water, reflecting the starlight in mesmerizing patterns. Then, without warning, a figure emerged from within, a being cloaked in silver identical to Cale. "Sarah," it said, its voice resonating with the same calm authority she remembered. "Do not fear." What's going on?" She stammered, clutching the pendant tightly. "Why are you here again?" "We have come to show you something," the being replied. "Something that will help you understand why your actions matter, not just to humanity, but to the entire cosmos." Before she could protest, the being extended a hand, gesturing for her to step closer. Hesitant but intrigued, Sarah obeyed, her heart racing as she crossed the distance between them. As soon as she touched the glowing surface of the craft, a Surge of warmth enveloped her, and the world around her dissolved into light. When Sarah opened her eyes, she found herself standing in a vast, otherworldly chamber. The walls shimmered with colors that defied description, and constellations of stars floated lazily overhead, forming intricate patterns she couldn't comprehend. In the center of the room stood Kale, accompanied by several other beings clad in similar silver garments. "Welcome, Sarah," Kale said warmly. "This is our observation station, one of many scattered throughout the universe. From here, we monitor civilizations, studying their behavior and potential for growth." Sarah looked around in awe, overwhelmed by the sheer scale and beauty of the place. "Why am I here?" she asked finally, her voice trembling with wonder. "To show you the impact of your choices," Kale explained. "Humanity stands at a crossroads. Many species collapse under the weight of their own selfishness, consumed by greed and conflict. But others thrive because individuals choose empathy over indifference, cooperation over division. Last night, you reminded us that humanity still has hope." With a wave of his hand, Kale summoned a holographic display. Images flickered to life. Before Sarah's eyes, scenes of war-torn cities, starving children, polluted oceans, all evidence of humanity's darker tendencies. Then, contrasting those grim visuals, there she was, trudging through the snowstorm to help Mrs. Thompson, her face illuminated by the firelight. "You represent the best of what humanity can be," Kale continued. "A beacon of compassion in a world often clouded by despair." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she absorbed his words. For the first time, she truly understood the significance of her actions, not just for Mrs. Thompson, but for the future of her species. "What happens now?" she asked softly. Kale smiled, his glowing visor softening. "Now you return to your world. But remember this, even the smallest acts of kindness can ripple outward, changing lives in ways you may never fully understand. Carry that knowledge with you, and use it wisely." As the chamber dissolved, Sarah stood in her yard, the pendant glowing softly in her hand, as the weight of what she had just experienced settled over her. The cold night air nipped at her cheeks, but she barely noticed. Her mind was racing with images from the alien observation station, the scenes of humanity's struggles and triumphs, Kale's words about compassion, and the overwhelming realization that her actions mattered more than she could have imagined. For a moment she felt small, insignificant, even compared to the vastness of the universe, but then she remembered Kale's message. Even the smallest acts of kindness can ripple outward. It was a reminder that every choice, no matter how minor it seemed, had the power to shape the future. And Sarah realized that this wasn't just about her. It was about everyone. Every person had the potential to make a difference, whether they knew it or not. With renewed determination, she tucked the pendant into her pocket and walked back inside. As she closed the door behind her, she glanced at the clock. It was late, but sleep felt impossible now. Instead, she made herself a cup of tea and sat by the window, staring out at the quiet town blanketed in snow. The world looked peaceful, untouched by the chaos she'd glimpsed beyond the stars. Yet she couldn't help but wonder, how many other people were out there, unknowingly shaping the destiny of their species? Her thoughts drifted to Agent Carter's visit earlier that day. Was he really just investigating strange lights in the sky? Or was there something more to his interest? She couldn't shake the feeling that he, and whoever he worked for, might be watching her closely. If Kale and his kind were observing humanity, it stood to reason that others might be doing the same. Maybe not all of them were as benevolent. The idea sent a shiver down her spine. What if someone discovered the pendant? Would they try to take it, or worse, use it to track her movements? Sarah resolved to keep it hidden, wearing it only when she was alone. For now it would remain her secret, a symbol of hope and a reminder of the responsibility she carried. The next morning, Sarah woke up with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. She dressed quickly, grabbed her coat, and headed out. into the crisp winter air. Her first stop was the local grocery store, where she stocked up on essentials, not just for herself but for Mrs. Thompson and a few other neighbors who might need help during the storm. When the cashier asked if she wanted assistance carrying her bags, Sarah smiled warmly and declined, knowing she could manage. But as she stepped outside, she noticed a young boy struggling to push a sled loaded with groceries across the parking lot. Without hesitation, Sarah approached him. "Need a hand?" she asked, already reaching for one side of the sled. The boy looked up at her, his cheeks flushed from the cold. "Thanks," he said shyly. Together, they hauled the sled to his car where his mother waited, bundled up in a thick coat. "You didn't have to do that," she said gratefully, "but we really appreciate it." "It's no trouble at all," Sarah replied with a smile. As she turned to leave, she caught a glimpse of the pendant peeking out from beneath her scarf. Its golden glow seemed brighter than usual, almost as if it were responding to her actions. She tucked it back under her clothes, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. Over the next few days, Sarah continued to look for ways to help those around her. She shoveled snow off driveways for elderly neighbors, dropped off hot meals to families struggling to make ends meet, and even volunteered at the community center, organizing supplies for those affected by the storm. Each act of kindness felt like a step forward, not just for her, but for humanity as a whole. She didn't know if Cale or his kind were still watching, but she hoped they could see the ripple effects of her efforts. Word of her generosity spread quickly through Maplewood. People began stopping her in the street to thank her, some even offering to join her cause. A group of teenagers started helping her deliver food and supplies, while a retired mechanic offered to fix broken heaters and generators for free. Slowly but surely, Sarah's actions inspired others to do the same, creating a chain reaction of goodwill that transformed the small town. But despite the growing positivity, Sarah couldn't ignore the lingering presence of Agent Carter and his mysterious organization. One afternoon, as she unloaded groceries at Mrs. Thompson's house, a black SUV pulled up outside. Her heart sank as Agent Carter stepped out, his expression unreadable. "Miss Bennett," he greeted her coolly. "Mind if I have a word?" Sarah nodded hesitantly, stepping onto the porch. "What is it this time?" Agent Carter glanced around, ensuring no one else was within earshot. "We've been monitoring unusual activity in this area," he said. "Specifically reports of strange occurrences involving you." Sarah's pulse quickened. "Strange occurrences? Like what?" He studied her carefully, his tone sharpening. "People talk, Miss Bennett. They mention seeing lights in the sky after storms, hearing odd noises, and witnessing inexplicable events. Some say you're connected somehow." She forced herself to remain calm, clutching the pendant hidden beneath her coat. "I'm just trying to help my neighbors," she said firmly. "If anything unusual has happened, I assure you, I don't know anything about it." Agent Carter's gaze lingered on her for a moment longer before he nodded. "Very well, but if you do notice anything, or remember anything, you'll let us know, won't you?" "Of course," Sarah replied, though she had no intention of sharing anything with him. As he drove away, she exhaled deeply, her nerves still on edge. Clearly someone was keeping tabs on her. Whether it was Agent Carter's agency or another group entirely, she couldn't afford to let her guard down. That evening, as Sarah sat by the fireplace, she found herself reflecting on everything that had happened. From the stormy night, she'd helped Mrs. Thompson to her encounter with Cale and the subsequent changes in her life. It all felt surreal. And yet, she couldn't deny the impact her actions had made, not just on those around her but on herself as well. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. Frowning, she got up to answer it, half expecting to see Agent Carter again. Instead, she found a young girl standing on her porch, clutching a tattered stuffed animal in one hand and a crumpled piece of paper in the other. "Can I help you?" Sarah asked gently. The girl hesitated, her eyes wide with uncertainty. "My mom told me to give you this," she said, holding out the paper. She said you're the nicest person in town." Sarah unfolded the note and read it silently. It was a heartfelt letter from the girl's mother, thanking her for everything she'd done to help the community. At the bottom, scrawled in shaky handwriting, were the words, "You're our hero." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she knelt down to hug the girl. "Thank your mom for me, okay?" she said softly. "And tell her I'll always be here if she needs anything." As the girl ran off into the night, Sarah closed the door and leaned against it, overwhelmed by emotion. She glanced at the pendant resting on the table, its golden glow steady and reassuring. In that moment, she understood that being a hero didn't mean having superpowers or saving the world overnight. It meant showing up day after day and choosing kindness even when it was hard. Kale's voice echoed in her mind. "You represent hope." And for the first time, Sarah believed it. The following weeks passed in a blur of activity. Sarah threw herself into her work, coordinating relief efforts and encouraging others to pay it forward. The town of Maplework thrived under her leadership, becoming a model of resilience and compassion. News outlets picked up the story, dubbing her the Storm Angel for her efforts during the harsh winter. Strangers reached out from neighboring towns, asking how they could replicate her success. Through it all, Sarah kept the pendant close, drawing strength from its gentle light. She never saw Kale again, but she didn't need to. His message stayed with her, guiding her choices and reminding her of the bigger picture. Humanity was flawed, yes, but it was also capable of incredible love and courage. And sometimes all it took was one person to spark change. One night, as she gazed at the stars twinkling above her roof, Sarah whispered a silent thank you to Kale and his kind. Somewhere out there, among the galaxies and constellations, they were watching and hoping, and she vowed to keep proving that humanity was worth believing in. Months had passed since Sarah's encounter with Kale, and life in Maplewood had settled into a rhythm of quiet normalcy. The snowstorm that had brought her face to face with an alien visitor was now just a distant memory, replaced by the gentle warmth of spring. The trees were budding, the streets were bustling with activity, and the town carried a renewed sense of hope thanks to Sarah's efforts. Yet for all the changes she'd inspired, there was still one thing she couldn't shake. The feeling that Kale and his kind were still watching. Sarah didn't mind. In fact, it gave her a strange kind of comfort. Knowing that someone or something out there believed in humanity's potential kept her motivated. She continued to live her life as she always had, helping those around her whenever she could. Whether it was volunteering at the local shelter, mentoring children at the community center, or simply lending a listening ear to a friend in need, Sarah poured her energy into making the world a little brighter. One small act of kindness at a time. But despite her outward optimism, Sarah couldn't ignore the lingering shadow of Agent Carter and his mysterious organization. Every so often, she'd spot a black SUV parked near her house or catch glimpses of strangers asking questions about her. She never confronted them directly. Instead, she stayed vigilant, keeping the pendant hidden and avoiding anything that might draw unwanted attention. Still, the thought of being watched by humans who didn't understand what they were dealing with left her uneasy. One evening, as Sarah sat on her porch sipping tea, she noticed something unusual in the sky. A faint shimmer, a flicker of light, too subtle for most people to notice, caught her eye. It hovered above the horizon, pulsing softly like a heartbeat. For a moment, she wondered if it was Kale returning to check on her. But as she squinted to get a better look, the light vanished, leaving behind only the familiar blanket of stars. Curiosity tugged at her. Was it a message? A sign that Kale was still nearby? Or perhaps just another trick of the night sky? Whatever it was, it reminded her of the responsibility she carried, not just for herself, but for humanity. She touched the pendant hanging around her neck, its golden glow steady and warm against her skin. If Kale was watching, she wanted him to see that she hadn't forgotten his words. Humanity still had hope, and she intended to prove it. The next morning, Sarah woke up to find a letter slipped under her front door. It was unmarked with no return address and written in neat block letters. Meet me at the old mill tonight at midnight. Come alone. Her heart raced as she read the note over and over again. Who could have sent it? Was it Cale reaching out once more? Or was it Agent Carter finally making his move? The thought of either possibility filled her with equal parts, excitement and dread. She debated whether to ignore the message entirely. After all, meeting someone late at night in an abandoned location sounded like a recipe for disaster. But deep down, she knew she couldn't turn away. If this was Kyle trying to contact her, she owed it to him and to herself to find out why. And if it was someone else, well, she'd deal with that when the time came. That night, Sarah bundled up in her coat and scarf, clutching the pendant tightly, as she made her way to the old mill on the outskirts of town. The building had been abandoned for years, its wooden walls weathered and gray, its windows shattered. Moonlight filtered through the cracks, casting eerie shadows on the ground. As she approached, her footsteps echoed softly in the silence. "Hello?" She called out, her voice trembling slightly. "Is anyone here?" For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of the wind rustling through the trees. Then, from the darkness, a figure emerged. It wasn't Cale. It was Agent Carter. "I'm glad you came," he said, stepping into the moonlight. His tone was calm, but his eyes betrayed a hint of urgency. "We need to talk." Sarah crossed her arms defensively, her grip tightening on the pendant beneath her coat. "About what?" Agent Carter glanced around cautiously before speaking. "You've been involved in some unusual events recently. Lights in the sky, strange visitors, objects that defy explanation. We know you're connected somehow." Sarah hesitated, weighing her options. Denying everything would be pointless. He clearly already suspected something. Instead, she decided to play along. "What do you want from me?" "We're not your enemy," he said quickly. "In fact, we're here to protect you and everyone else. There are others out there who aren't as benevolent as the ones you've encountered. They've been watching humanity for centuries, waiting for the right moment to intervene." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. "Intervene how?" "That's what we're trying to figure out," Agent Carter admitted. "But we believe you're key to understanding their plans. You've seen things most people can't even imagine. Tell me, what did they say to you? What do they want?" Sarah shook, her head slowly. "I don't know what you're talking about. I haven't seen anything unusual." Agent Carter sighed, clearly frustrated. "Look, Miss Bennett, I know you're hiding something, and if you don't cooperate, we can't guarantee your safety, or the safety of those around you." His words sent a chill down her spine. Was he threatening her, or warning her? Before she could respond, a soft hum filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. Both Sarah and Agent Carter turned toward the source of the noise, a glowing orb descending from the sky hovering silently above the mill. The orb shimmered like liquid metal, its surface rippling with colors that defied description. Then, without warning, it split open, revealing Kyle inside. He stepped forward, his glowing visor fixed on Agent Carter. "You will leave her be," Cale said, his voice resonating with authority. "She is under our protection." Agent Carter took a step back, his expression hardening. "This doesn't concern you," he snapped. "We're here to ensure humanity's survival, not yours." Cale tilted his head slightly as if amused by the man's defiance. "Your survival depends on hers. Do not interfere." Before Agent Carter could respond, the orb enveloped Cale once more, lifting him back into the sky. As it disappeared into the clouds, Sarah felt a surge of relief and gratitude. Cale had come back for her, just as he'd promised. When she turned to face Agent Carter, he was already walking away, muttering under his breath. Clearly, whatever plan he'd had was ruined, for now at least. Sarah didn't care. All that mattered was that she was safe. As she walked home that night, Sarah reflected on everything that had happened. From the stormy night she'd helped Mrs. Thompson to her encounters with Cale and Agent Carter, her life had changed in ways she never could have imagined. She had seen the best and worst of humanity, and of beings beyond Earth. Through it, all she had learned one important lesson: kindness was a force more powerful than fear, greed, or hatred. When she reached her house, she paused on the porch, gazing up at the stars. Somewhere out there, Cale and his kind were watching, hoping that humanity would rise to meet its potential. And somewhere closer to home, Agent Carter and his organization were plotting their next move. But Sarah wasn't afraid anymore. She had the pendant, a symbol of hope and a reminder of the power within her. No matter what challenges lay ahead, she knew she could face them with courage and compassion. Because sometimes, all it took was one act of kindness to change the course of history. And Sarah was determined to keep proving that humanity was worth believing in, even if it meant standing up to forces far greater than herself.